first decide to want to recover the mussels
What made me decide I wanted to
or
recover?
to work to?
Let's see, by that time I was already into working with native mussels, but I kind of went into the field of freshwater mussel conservation, kicking and screaming. I thought I'd be a fisheries biologist. I like to go fishing. And I thought, oh, I want to become a fishing. What can I do to get paid to go fishing? And I learned that the closest thing I could do would become a fisheries biologist. And there are people who manage fisheries and lakes and rivers for people to go catch fish in. And so I talked with my advisor about different schools that might be good. I went and interviewed a bunch of different colleges, and then I went to this one school that seemed really promising, Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, but they only had this project on mussels. No, thank you. And so I came and talked with my advisor, and he suggested, you know, think about it. Colleges with good reputations, it's good to get a degree from such an institution, and you could also do some fisheries related things for your mussel project. So I thought about it a little bit more, and I thought, okay, I talked to my potential advisor down there, and I said, if I can do some fisheries related work for this mussel project, I'll take it on because when I leave here, I want to get a job in fisheries. And so I started working on this project. I learned about how much trouble mussels are in, and I had this strong streak in me that wants to try and make the world a better place. And when I learned that mussels are the most threatened group of organisms in the US, that they really need some help, I thought, okay, I can combine my interest in trying to make the world a better place and take what I've learned now about mussels to try and improve their lot in life. And so then that's how I got got into mussels. It was a lot more interesting than I thought. Who would have guessed these little rocks with gills would be inspiring to me? But for some people, they are, and I'm one of them. And so that's how I got into becoming a mussel biologist. I haven't been involved with that process as much, and that's like my excuse for saying like, well, I don't remember that, but I have been asked for advice. People have said, hey, we talked about the fat bucket,
Yeah.
and hey, maybe we could bring that one up here and reestablish it back in St. Anthony where it was first described. St. Anthony Falls, that'd be really cool. And there's another mussel, the largest I've ever seen. It was over in the Ohio State Museum the museum at Ohio State University, and it's this thing called the Dialeptodon, and it also uses the freshwater drum as host, and there's freshwater drum everywhere. And there's a great big specimen that was found right at the mouth of the Minnesota, right where you guys are. Well, we know what species of fish it uses as a host, and we're developing better ways to culture the juvenile mussels. It seems getting that close to being able to like bring them back with, and you'd want to do it knowledgeably since we'll be working with federally endangered species. But it seems like some people who know how we can clean up the Minnesota River so that we can get those mussels to do well in that river.
Is that the only thing stopping it? Just because it's not clean? Or there's other things that are preventing us from.
And it seems that certain environments are good for mussels and some aren't. Like heavily depositional areas, it's just raining silt down all the time because it's a nice backwater. You probably only find one or two mussel species in those environments, like those Nerf ponds you're talking about. Like the light-shelled mussels that can get up and sit on top of that light flocculent, they can do all right. But the heavier river mussels, they just go down into the anaerobic part of that flocculent pool and they just suffocate. And so, but if there's too much flow going by, the river bottom is just moving constantly, and the mussels just be spinning and they wouldn't do well in such an environment. So you need to have just the right amount of flow, and the riverbed needs to be stable so they're not tumbling downstream like in sandbanks of sand, like you'll see in many rivers around here. They have to have just the right environment to live. And so, let's say we are able to come up with some ways to treat for pests on our agricultural land that didn't involve toxic runoff, we'd still have the fact that the farmers would like to have the soil conditions just right for plants. So not too dry, not too wet. And so right now, I understand they're installing tile systems all around farmland, southern Minnesota, that gets the water off the land quickly.
Yeah, we heard about that.
Yeah. In the past, the water on the slopes would kind of collect down in streams and go down into the river, or oftentimes they kind of collect in wetlands, and then those wetlands would kind of percolate water to the shallow surface water table, or maybe across the top of the land, slowly and over the entire summer back into the river. So you get water raining down, and the water would kind of come back into the river in a nice, relatively slow rate. But if you put pipes through all those wetlands or on the lands, it just empties the water really fast into the river. So we could empty the Mountain Dew quickly into our mouth, or I could just tip it over and pour it into your mouth, and which would be easier to swallow. It's gonna be easier to take sips. That's what I find easier anyway. I don't chug my pop, but the same thing with the river. If you just poured all that water back into the river, think of, wet water's heavy.
Yeah.
All that mass goes into the river and just, whoa, now it just starts moving the riverbed and changing the riverbed and eroding the stream banks. So that's what they're doing. They're allowing the water to drain quickly, and it just changes the hydrodynamic environment. So instead of the water coming up slowly, going down slowly, it just pulses up, and it's just like taking a steamroller just right through the stream bed and just pushing. And so the mussels are living down in the bottom. All this power is coming down. All this shear stress is what it's called more formally, coming down the river and just changing a stable mussel bed into just this, either getting covered by sand or excavating it and just shoving it down the river. So now it's not a toxicology question, is it? It's the hydrodynamic environment. It's very different, but very pertinent. So some people have talked about, well, can we reestablish these wetlands because it helps with.
A lot of it is focusing on like the impact that the specific species has like on our society. So just from your point of view, from what you know about mussels, what do you think, like how do they benefit our society now, like the environment, even socially, economically, and what would happen maybe if we didn't do anything and they eventually were gone?
Yeah, I kind of wonder about that too. I think Einstein and other broad thinkers often give examples of extremes to help bring a point across. For example, why do we need so many different kinds of birds or so many different kinds of plants in the world? Arguably, couldn't we just eat corn and chicken for the rest of our life? Wouldn't that simplify things a lot if you just? But really, day after day, corn. No, I like other foods every once in a while. So selfishly, it's nice to have a diversity of things out there. And if I just went out driving, let's drive to the St. Croix River and try and catch the one fish that lives there now. We'd just be driving across fields of corn. I like the fall colors. So that's just an extreme example. Like, I just like some variety in my life. And then when, like, for example, if I were to drive across the countryside and just see the corn, I like to see the different trees and different flowers. And then when I spend a little time looking at the trees, it's like, wow, they're really doing different things, drawing up different nutrients, protecting the sand and the soil in different ways. They have different longevities. They help the local insects and plants and other animals and birds in different ways. And then it quickly becomes very complicated with all these different species working with all these different geological features, and it becomes overwhelming for me to try and understand it all, which comes to my main point is like, well, how many species of mussels or how many plant species do we need? Yeah, I get your point about it'd be nice to have more than just eating corn and chickens, but how many animals, how many plants do we need? Now, I just don't know. This is a very complex system. So how many mussels do we need? I don't know. But until I have a better idea, it seems like it'd be a good idea to keep them around. That I know cancer drugs have been developed from some yew pines out in the west, and what's the next drug going to come from? I understand that it's very, very rare to see tumors on mussels. Well, that's interesting. Why? Well, let's keep them around until we have somebody who studies that a little bit. And is Higgins eye, is that particularly robust against fighting cancer? I don't know. Maybe. So I think it'd be wise for us to just Like it's nice to make money, it's nice to live well, but I think part of the richness of the United States can also be our biological diversity. So I'd like to keep some of that, and so that's why I'm working in this area, is to try and do my little part, like to help the mussels, to help the fish, keep them around so that just to enjoy, yeah, and eat some of them. But look at some of them, and then downstairs we saw the different mussels doing different things. Like, wow, that's interesting. And then more kind of metaphysically, like I can hang out and talk with people, and we can get some insights from one another. But to go out in nature, I am inspired by nature in ways that people just can't be a sunset. It can't be the Milky Way. It can't be the leaves changing in the fall across a beautiful water body flowing by. It's inspirational and for me, that moves me in ways that hanging out with people doesn't. So I like to have both the people and the natural experiences. I'd like to keep the landscape, to have some of its integral parts that we found here when we Europeans first came to the U.S. So that's why I want to work to conserve the Higgins Eye. It seems to have a number of economic reasons to keep them around. Like they filter the water, so now they're clarifying the water, so our water treatment plants don't have to, and that's a big input that we have on our tax basis to try and clear the water up so we can drink it. So they're doing it for free. Thank you, mussels. The mussels capture nutrients that may have otherwise been washed downstream. Those nutrients that they don't use, they create these pseudofeces that a lot of insects, especially midges, like to eat. And midges and other insects are the food base for a lot of fish. Fishing and fishery management is a multi-billion-dollar industry in Minnesota. I think over $4 billion are spent annually on people going out fishing. So that's a big economic reason. The mussels are there helping energize many fisheries in the state and clarifying the water, which people tend to like to go swimming and fishing in more. And so those are some economic reasons to keep them around. And and then we talked a little bit about the potential medical reasons. The pearl industry, an Asian industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry over there in Southeast Asia and Japan, is heavily dependent on native mussels. It is a natural pearl. If you look at it, if you were to cut a natural pearl in half, you'd be foolish, number one, but no. and number two is you'd see the core, the center of it is about 95% native mussel shells. So they'll take these big mussels that have thick shells, and they'll make spheres called blanks out of those shells, insert them under an oyster just a certain way, and then in about 18 months, I think, they'll produce a natural pearl that people can then polish and put on strings and sell. So it's a multi-million-dollar industry in the U.S. sending pearl blanks over to Asia, and then they create these beautiful pearls and sell them back to the U.S. and other countries as a multi-billion-dollar industry. But it seems to me, if we have so many of the mussels here, it seems like, why don't we develop some of that expertise right here in our own area? We have mussels that produce pink insides, purple insides, white insides. We have all sorts of really colorful, interesting shells here that we could use maybe to start our own kind of industry, jewelry industry. So those are some economic and kind of some societal reasons I think of when I think about why to keep mussels around. I don't know, does that seem valuable to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, keeping a balance,
Yeah.
a good balance.
I know that if you were to look at a mussel in a nearby rock, the diversity of algae and the density of algae on this mussel is more than the rock next to it. It's more than the empty mussel shell next to it. It's probably because these mussels are bringing in water all the time, more water movement. They're releasing nutrients that they're not using. So they just provide this delicious environment for all these little insects and other animals to feed on. And then again, the fishes are coming and feeding on the insects that are not only benefiting from their pseudofeces, but the algae that's growing on their shells. So he analogizes these mussel beds to like coral reefs. They're just feeding, mile-long buffet line for these fish to feed on. That's thousands of pounds of fish per year that they're going to be helping, and it's thought that they help stabilize the riverbed. So that if we were to go to one half of the river here and it's all gravelly and cobbly and nice for mussels, we'll find a lot more life than if we went over on this side of the river and there's just sand dunes just rolling. Like if you go to the beach, it's nice to hang out on, but there's usually not much living there. It's just all this sand. And not much can live in such a dynamic environment. And so the mussel beds are also helping stabilize, we think, the riverbed to make it more productive. And then one of the problems with the hydrology issue that I talked about before, if you send the water off the land really quickly and it just brings a lot of sand into the river, now you're going to be smothering the mussel beds. Now they can't stabilize the riverbed. Now you've made the problem worse. Now the mussels aren't there to help stabilize the riverbed. You're going to have a more dynamic environment, more sand dunes, and that's going to make it tougher for them to reestablish themselves. Oh, by the way, it takes, a mussel to be 5 to 10 years before it even starts reproducing. They live 50 years, so it might, just to get that first colony of mussels going, it might take 50 or 100 years. So let's not wreck these mussel beds that have taken who knows how long to really establish themselves. They're serving us for free. It seems like diverse ecosystems are more stable than less diverse ecosystems. And so that's one reason why I'm not interested in like stocking lakes with zebra mussels to help clean them up. I'd rather go with our native community and see what its strengths and pros and cons are, and then figure out like why are the algae blooms growing in your lake right now. It's probably because you're maybe fertilizing your lawn a little too much, changing the balance there. But those are just some of the benefits that come to mind right now about why I think the mussels are valuable and why I think it's worthwhile for us to be spending our time talking about them.
It's just interesting. I was just thinking while you're talking, about like how the beach, when it's just sand, it's not actually that great for things to live on, even though we think, oh, perfect, beautiful, nice beach.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of like something Mr. Koenig said about like grass and how it's just one species, and we put so much importance on it being green and full, and we put all our water into just making our grass look good when it's actually not even that great for the ecosystem. Like it doesn't serve multiple purposes.
Yeah.
Really. And so
I like having some areas that are grassy. Like I love playing soccer.
Yeah.
In order to do that, then in the woods.
Yeah.
And similarly, like I want to go play on the beach, but I don't want to change much of my like the whole river to a beach.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's what's hard for me sometimes is like that's just my opinion, and I've talked with some people who. I was working with this guy and we were talking about Southwest Minnesota, and I said, hey, I have some students here who want to come land. We'd like to do some research. And we're studying a native mussel, and he pretty much he said right to my face, what you're doing is a waste of time.
Oh.
And it was refreshing. How many people in Minnesota tell you exactly what they think?
Yeah.
To your face, they'll be nice. Minnesota nice, yeah. But he said, I think it's a waste of my taxes, what you're doing. I would not want my taxes paying for what you're doing. I don't want, I would rather see the money that's going into your program helping the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I'm trying to help the community and I went into some of the details. And no, that's not helping the community. We're out here in rural Minnesota. We need economic development. We need help like that. And I said, well, there's some ways, cleaning the water and stabilizing the riverbed, making it better for the fish. No, we don't need that. So, but he then spent the next 3 hours of his afternoon, where he could have been working on his ranch, helping us try and catch fish, moving electric wires so we wouldn't get shocked. I thought that was interesting. I don't believe, but sometimes actions speak louder than words, or people are complicated. I don't think what you're doing is right, but I'm going to help you now. Take valuable time of my day to help you. Thank you. I told Lucas, thank you for your help today. Sure, that was interesting. That was neat. I still essentially think what you're doing is needed, but then he helped us too, and we're planning to go out there again this fall, and I bet he'll say, yeah, you can go on my land. I need to respect that other people think that what we think's important isn't important, and that's important too. And I still need to be able to talk with them